Right, the Sea of Galilee. And so the Sea of Galilee was also known for sudden storms. It was a place that everyone that traveled the seas knew about. Okay, so one, we have these disciples on the boat who are fishermen who have always sailed that sea a lot. Okay. Secondly, you have Jesus who's doing what? Sleeping, right? And so that kind of points to show the human side of Jesus. Jesus even got tired, right? And he needed rest as well. So we see two sides. We see the disciples and we see Jesus. Now, when we consider the fact that the disciples were fishermen and were fishermen who actually fished in the Sea of Galilee, you can kind of understand that they probably felt very comfortable out there, right? They were out there a lot. They knew the waters. They knew the area pretty well. And it was a comfortable situation for them. And so it was easy for them to let Jesus go to sleep. It was easy for them to say, you know what, Jesus, you need rest. Go ahead and sleep because we have this. This is our sea. We know what to do here. We'll take care of this. You go ahead and you can go to sleep. And a lot of times this is what happens in our lives as Christians as well. When we get into comfortable moments, when we don't have any sort of difficulties coming in our life, we have a good job, we have good health, we have so many other things, it's easy for us to look and say, Jesus, go ahead. We can kind of put Jesus behind us. We're not completely casting him off, but we're going to let him kind of take a rest. Put him behind. I'll take control over this because I know I'm comfortable here. I know what to do. And this is the situation that a lot of us have, right? We're okay with Jesus being behind us, sleeping. And I think one of the most fascinating things about this particular passage, and if you consider the fact that the disciples have been with him for all this time, right? They've seen him do all these miraculous things. It's easy for us to look at them and say, well, how are they doubting God, right? How are they even fearing? They have Jesus in the boat with them. Like, what are they so scared of? They've seen all these miracles firsthand. They've seen him turn water into wine. They've seen him heal sick people. So why are they so afraid? And I think from an outside perspective, when we read this passage, it's easy to question them, right? To look at them, look down on them a little bit and say, what's going on with these guys? Why are they fearing? They have Jesus in the boat. But if we really look into our own lives, I think the same thing can apply to us a lot of times. All of us have seen Jesus work in our lives in the past. We've seen God do great miracles in our life. We've seen him answer prayers. We've seen him heal sicknesses that we have. We've seen him do big things. And yet, a lot of times when we are faced with new struggles, new difficulties in life, we have small doubts that creep up in our mind, right? We start to fear. We start to worry. We fail to trust in Jesus, even though he's proven himself over and over and over to us. And it's the same situation that we see here with the disciples. So the next thing I want to focus on now is what Jesus was doing. Okay, so now we've looked at the disciples. We see that they've been following him for all this time. They've seen all these great things, yet at the same time they're afraid. They're showing fear. Now let's look at what Jesus is doing, right? Before they set out to go onto this boat, when he said, in verse 35, going back to that, when he said, let's go to the other side, I don't doubt that Jesus was fully aware of what was about to happen. There's no question that Jesus knew what was going to happen once they set out on sail. And yet at the same time, he decides to go to sleep, right? Jesus was with them in the boat, but yet he decides to go to sleep. And I think a lot of times this kind of applies to us, right? Even if it feels like he's not with us, when we go through different situations, we can grow weary, we can grow tired. It feels like God's not with us. Or we start to ask God, where are you? Why aren't you answering my prayers? I think it's very important for us to always understand and always remember that God is always present. And he knows what's going to happen, and he allows it to happen, right? Jesus allowed the disciples to go into that storm by themselves, knowing I'm going to take a nap, and I know this is going to happen, because he wanted to teach them a lesson, right? We go through difficulties, we go through struggles in life because God wants us to develop that faith in him. He wants us to increase our trust in him. If we just got everything we wanted in life was a smooth sail all the way through, we would have no reliance on God. We would not need God. We would just feel like everything is going okay. I don't need God. Everything is going okay. Going okay in our life. So now the question is, what does it cost to trust God, right? The cost of trusting God is going to be great. When we look in the New Testament, we see Jesus when he was on the cross. I don't doubt for a minute that if he wanted to get off that cross, he could have. Right? This was the most all-powerful God in human form coming down, who's performed all these miracles, and now humans have nailed him to a cross. Jesus could have very easily, like that, gotten off that cross if he wanted to. But he had trust in God. He had trust in the Father that there was an ultimate purpose for his needing to stay on that cross. And so for a lot of us in our lives, sometimes trusting God means staying on that cross. Whatever that cross may be for you, whether it's sickness, whether it's financial struggles, whether it's worry about your future, jobs, whatever it may be that we are going through right now or that we will be going through, sometimes trusting in God means that you stay on that cross, that you endure that, because ultimately at the end of the day, God has a greater purpose for our lives than just the minute little things, right? We serve an omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent God who looks down, and these small struggles that we worry about day to day are nothing for Him. I mean, if we look at the Old Testament, we look at the book of Job, we see the struggles that Job went through, and Job remained faithful through it all. He did not sin against God. And when we look back, we think, Job must not have known, right, at the time, why am I going through this? What am I dealing with this? What's the purpose of this? But now we look, and we are several thousand years later. Each of us can look into Job's life, see the struggles that he went through, and we can build up our faith. We can learn from him. And I'm sure at the time that Job was going through all of that, he had no idea what was going to happen. He had no idea why God was putting him through this and how many several thousands, millions of people his story would impact. So now, what do we do about this, right? How do we start to trust God? I think the number one and most important thing is to know Him better. The better we know someone, the more you trust them, right? You're not going to trust a stranger as much as you might trust your own brother or your best friend or someone that you are more comfortable with. So get to know God more. Each and every day, I think that's something that each of us needs to focus on in our own lives. Get to know God. Get to develop a relationship with Him. Because the more we know Him, the better we know Him, the more comfortable we become, and the more that we can actually start trusting Him. And secondly, be thankful when we go through trials. In James 1:2-4, it says, "My brothers and sisters, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." It's easy when we go through struggles to pray and say, "God, take this away from me. Get me through this. Get me through this." But I think the hard part is to do what this passage says right here. Consider it pure joy when we face trials. I don't know of anyone that will go through a trial and consider it pure joy. This is one of those things that's just totally out there that it seems impossible to attain. But I think that's something that we need to strive towards. When we go through difficulties, understanding that God has a greater purpose for this. Momentarily, it might seem like a struggle in our lives, but we trust in God. We have faith that God will get us through it, and at the end, He will have something much greater to do. And I think it's important that we understand that when we ask God for strength or we ask Him for faith, He's not going to just give it to us. He's not going to just grant us faith or grant us trust. What God's going to do is He's going to put us in situations where we can show faith, right? God, when we pray for something, He doesn't just hand it to us. He puts us in situations where we can exercise that. So if you're praying, God, increase my faith, increase my trust, then He's going to give us those situations, those trials. And so today, wherever you may be, whether you're on one side where you've been asking God to, help me, and you're growing weary, or you're in a good point in life where, you're not having any struggles, you're okay, life is going well, I think in both situations it's important today to remember that we need to continue relying on God, that we need to continue developing our trust in God, because even if it seems like He's sleeping in the boat, He is present and He is always in control. So I want to leave you with these words, and I pray that God will bless each of you.